Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
It is my immense honor to be here today to welcome you to the 11th annual America's Role in the World Conference. My name is Celine Yang, and I'm a sophomore here at the Hamilton Luger School studying International Studies and East Asian Languages and Cultures. My journey to HLS started in high school. I was freshly 16, sitting in my room for hours, studying International Baccalaureate Biology. And if you don't know what that is, I truly congratulate you. At the time, I believed the best way I could support my family was to become a doctor. In no way, shape, or form did I think I would end up here at HLS. When I arrived at HLS, everything began to change. In my freshman year, I became a founding member of the first ever Hamilton Luger student government. At the time, we were building something entirely new, working closely with faculty to create programs, events, and opportunities we believed Hamilton Luger students deserved in order to succeed professionally. That experience pushed me to grow. It pushed me to take initiative and step into spaces that once felt unfamiliar. This year, I am honored to announce that I was elected president of the Hamilton Luger student government, where I now have the privilege of continuing that work and representing the voices of students across our school. Beyond that, I've had the opportunity to serve as a resident assistant in the Hamilton Luger Living Learning Center, where I get to support students in their own journeys and watch their growth every day. I'm constantly inspired by the ambition and the potential of the community around me. Through all these experiences, my path became clearer. I plan to become the first in my family to attend law school. That dream carries a deep meaning for me. It represents not only where I'm going, but everything that made it possible for me to get here. I want to take a moment to recognize that I did not get here alone. To my mother, who immigrated from Taiwan to the United States and has only ever known the meaning of hard work, she is my foundation and my strength. And to my father, who never limited my creativity or my spirit and has worked every day to make our dreams a reality. And to my professors in the International Studies and East Asian Languages and Cultures departments, my mentors and my friends, I'm deeply grateful for your guidance, your belief in my potential, and your unwavering commitment to pushing me towards excellence. HLS has given me more than just opportunities. It has given me the confidence to dream bigger, the tools to pursue those dreams, and the belief that I am capable of achieving more than I once thought was possible. And because of that, I know that this is only the beginning. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce IU Bloomington's Interim Provost, John Ciorciari.
Thank you so much, Celine, and welcome everybody to America's Role in the World. As Celine mentioned, I'm John Ciorciari. I was the Dean of HLS until recently. I'm now serving as Interim Provost, and I'm delighted to have you here. America's Role in the World is a vital opportunity to talk about what the U.S. Role in the world is, what it ought to be, and the importance of this topic couldn't be clearer in these turbulent times. We also have another reason to come together, and that is to celebrate the life of our namesake, Lee Hamilton, who embodied the values of our school and this conference, and who gave so much to both of them over the years. You know, people often ask us, what exactly is a Hoosier? Lee Hamilton is a darn good answer to that question. Smart, steady, hardworking, warm, humble, and kind, with a self-effacing sense of humor that puts everyone at ease, including me. One of the first times that I met Lee in his office when I came to IU, he very generously invited me to dinner, then paused and said, "Well, I don't know if you're worth that much. Let's do lunch." He was a basketball star, also fitting for a Hoosier, and he told us in an event here at IU last summer that one of the best things about being a nonagenarian is that people's memory of an athlete's heroics get more and more flattering with age. He said by the time he turned 94, he had never missed a shot. Of course, Lee Hamilton had a serious side too. In decades of service in Congress and other leadership roles, he became one of America's leading voices in foreign policy and national security, known for his roles on the 9/11 Commission, his work on nuclear politics, intelligence, homeland security, and much more. Lee Hamilton had a strong sense of home, a strong sense of core values, and a deep commitment to his country. He also had the humanity and the humility to listen to others and to learn across the aisle and around the world. He believed deeply in global education, and he loved this university and this school. He was troubled by the divisions we see within the United States and internationally, and we spoke about that often. But even in his 90s, he didn't sit back and lament. He engaged, writing influential pieces on foreign policy and giving us wise counsel on how our school can make a positive difference. That's why on the morning of his final day, he was 4 floors up from where you're sitting, working in his office, helping to shape conversations on America's role in the world. That's where he wanted to be, and we're blessed to have had him there. So I'd now like to invite you to watch a short video tribute to one of our namesakes and our North Stars, Lee Hamilton.
Congressman Lee Hamilton of Indiana, what does it mean to you to be a Hoosier?
Well, I think the word Hoosier is a very popular one with anyone from Indiana. I think it means a down-to-earthness, a lack of pretense, a friendliness. Has its roots, I guess, in our rural heritage and background, but it always signifies warm feelings about people and personalities.
In order to look forward, you've got to look back. It helps to look back. But this is a great country. The important thing is what we do about the future. What we do today, each one of us, to try to make the future better for our children and our grandchildren. That's the important thing. And I can sit here and speculate all day about what it's going to be like 10 years from now. You can too. Neither one of us know what we're talking about. What is important is not what we predict for the future. What's important is what we do to make things better in the present.
At its best, Lee Hamilton once said, representative democracy gives us a system where all of us have a voice in the process and a stake in the product. In his 34 years in Congress, Lee Hamilton was a faithful servant to that ideal, representing his district, his beloved Indiana, his country with integrity and honor.
Lee dealt with major foreign policy issues that were important to be addressed in a bipartisan way. He was eminently fair in doing that. His service as the head of the co-chair of the 911 Commission was critically important to have someone of his character and his respect that he had gained heading up that investigation. So he certainly laid down a mark, and I think, in my opinion, well deserved that medal.
He says, look, I'm a politician a short period of every 2 years. The rest of the time I represent all the people.
When it really comes back to it, he never forgot who he was, where he came from, and what it was all about.
He's going to go down in history as one of the most beloved elected officials Indiana has ever had the opportunity to say he serves for us. And I'm proud to say I voted for Lee Hamilton.
Lee was a wonderful expert on foreign policy. He was thoughtful. He was a true patriot and a wonderful person to work with. He will be missed.
And what I'd like to say is Lee just embodied goodness and public service. Lee was a statesman, a leader, the real deal.
If Lee Hamilton had just lent his name to our school, together with Senator Richard Lugar, that would have been enough. What other school is named after two gentle giants of foreign policy? One Democrat, one Republican, both winners of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But Lee did much more than lend his name. He gave our students a mission and a mandate that they carry long after graduation. To embrace unity over division, to put principle over party, to support U.S. global leadership, tempered by humility and pragmatism. His challenge to us was to build a school that would live up to the standards of the guys whose names are on our door. At the naming of the school, Lee coined a phrase about the students who make the school their home, an endless line of splendor. Lee's commitment to and belief in our students is his biggest gift to us and ensures that the line of splendor will continue for generations.
Congressman Hamilton's loss will be felt very deeply here at the school that bears his name. I had the great good fortune early in my career of working for him on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Now I was a lowly intern and I didn't have a whole lot of opportunity to intersect with him directly, but his standing and the esteem with which he was held was evident in the work of the committee, in the quality of the staff that he had assembled, and the seriousness with which they went about their work. It's so meaningful for me to be involved in leading a school that bears his name 30 years later. While we will miss the congressman enormously, we are inspired by his legacy. That will come through in our research, in our engagement, but most importantly in producing the next generation of leaders with the decency, commitment, curiosity, and warmth that the congressman embodied.
All of us are already missing Lee Hamilton's example and his leadership. He represented an extraordinary intellect, a true statesman, and a good man. He reflected the best of Hoosier leadership. He's somebody that so many of us learn from, and so many of us can continue to benefit from his example. As a Hoosier, as an American, all of us should recognize what his style of leadership represented and hold our leaders and ourselves accountable to that example.
Lee was a generous man. I think he embodied the Hoosier spirit. He never stopped when he returned to Bloomington and worked at Indiana University. He never stopped loving his local community, his state, and giving back to it. And I know his neighbors and members of the university community feel that loss, feel the loss of a good person, someone who was looking to help however he could.
Lee Hamilton lived out the word citizen in, for sure, the very best way that was imaginable. And if you're looking for a role model, anyone, a model congressman, a model statesman, you really just don't have to look further. If you're in a meeting with Lee Hamilton and everyone around the table had asked some version of the same question, Lee was the one who came in with a fresh perspective. As they say about Wayne Gretzky, he skated to where the puck would be, not to where it was. And that is clearly why everyone leaned in to listen to Lee. He widened the lens because he was truly insightful.
I think I still have a voice to contribute. I believe strongly in the public dialogue. I believe that's the way representative government works. I would still want to be a part of it to the extent that I can. And as long as I can contribute, think I can contribute, I want to continue to do so.
Good morning, everybody. I'm David Bosco, and I'm the interim dean here at the Hamilton Lugar School. It's hard to add very much to what was said there by ambassadors, secretaries of state, and senators, but I do want to make one additional point, which is that Congressman Hamilton loved this conference. In fact, one of the highlights of the early iterations of this conference was a panel in which the Congressman and Senator Lugar would offer their perspective, their wisdom, and their wit and Congressman Hamilton had a wonderful sense of humor, as John mentioned. He was an active participant in this conference for a number of years, and even when his health didn't permit him to be a participant, he was an eager and enthusiastic consumer of the wisdom and insights produced by the experts that we assemble here. And I can say with a very high degree of confidence that Lee Hamilton would have loved the lineup that we have for you today and tomorrow, leading off with our panel on Heartland agriculture and the rapidly changing export landscape. These were obviously issues that mattered hugely to Congressman Hamilton as he represented the interests of this congressional district for more than 30 years. We're then going to move on to something else that he intersected with frequently, and that is the U.S. military's role in the world. That panel is obviously going to be addressing those issues at a time when that role is particularly intense, controversial, and dynamic. This afternoon, we have a wonderful group of experts sponsored by our own Tobias Center to discuss America's global health and development strategy in an era of massive change in that world. And then, if that weren't all enough, we are going to be having a keynote address later in the afternoon by Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, the former UN ambassador and cabinet member. Tomorrow, we have another packed day. In the morning, I'm very excited about this. I'll be moderating a discussion on America's often fractious relationship with the United Nations. Ambassador Thomas Greenfield will then join us again, and she'll be speaking with leading international relations scholar Daniel Dresner to try to take a 30,000-foot look at the direction of U.S. foreign policy. And finally, with what I can only describe as exquisite timing, we will have a panel on space governance. Just as the crew of Artemis II prepares for re-entry, we will have experts engaging on the geopolitical and commercial implications of the coming leaps in space exploration. So we've got an awful lot for people to digest. I'm so delighted that you're here. I hope you will attend as much as you are able. Please enjoy. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vasco McAleer, and I'm so excited to kick off the first panel of this year's ARW. I'm a junior studying economics and international studies with minors in mathematics and Chinese, and I serve as the conference coordinator for the Indiana Model UN travel team, as well as the director general for the past high school conference we hosted. In my time at HLS, I've been a part of the Global Development Consultants, part of an HLS and Sigma Iota Rho podcast, the Chinese flagship program, as well as the student ambassador team. So safe to say, HLS has been a big part of my career as a student. And it's truly an honor to be speaking to you now all here on this stage. I grew up between Indianapolis, the UK, and France. And while I love the Indiana part of me, the want to study international studies didn't necessarily have me looking to go to university in rural southern Indiana. I thought myself bound for the city or the international college life, and that was where I would find other like-minded students and faculty. That being said, my opinion completely shifted upon my first visit to IU and HLS on an HLS day. I found a community of driven and enthusiastic professors, students, and professionals, as well as specialty organizations in what I was studying, like the Chinese flagship, as well as real global work experience opportunities. I realized just how much they were building down here in Bloomington, and I really wanted to be a part of it. I found that it wasn't necessarily the city life that I was looking for in my academic pursuits, but the right group of committed scholars and opportunities that would push me past my comfort zone. And opportunities did I find. I worked with Fulbright in Canada, as well as the Asia Pacific Business Association of Indiana, or APBAI, and these gave me a new perspective on how I should approach my academics. I pivoted to taking more analytical classes in economics and math, and now I plan on working more in the intersection of economics and international affairs, with aspirations for breaking into consulting or the airline industry, and plans to intern this summer with the Federal Reserve's Atlanta branch. If there's one thing I've learned about Indiana from my recent work and academic experiences, it's that despite being an almost landlocked state, what happens around the world impacts everyone here directly, all the time. I worked with the Language Roadmap program here at IU, and I helped them make the very graphics that outline the different diasporas and communities from foreign nations that make up Indiana, and the direct impact they have on the economy here. It's really fascinating to just see it all laid out on charts and maps. My time at APBAI so far is also showing me just how crucial our business relationships are with the APAC region in particular, especially in the manufacturing and agricultural sectors. I'm really interested to learn more about what I've only just started to understand in my studies today from these experts, and to see just how Indiana and the Heartland's core industries have been shaped by the recent US trade policy, for example. With that, it's truly an honor to introduce this panel, as the global importance of agriculture in this region cannot be overstated. And I look forward to a conversation that I know will deepen my own understanding of the forces shaping the state and region that I've come to call home. I would like to introduce Jillian Turner, the moderator of today's discussion. She's the Senior Advisor as well as Vice President for Strategy and Operations at IU Lab, which is IU's big biotech, life sciences, commercialization, and workforce development initiative. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Vasco. Thank you. We have the absolute delight and pleasure of being the first panel here. Thank you for taking the time to join us today to have an important conversation on the global nature of heartland agriculture. Because we're the first panel, I'll do a little bit of rules of the road. We're going to spend about 45 minutes having a conversation, and then we will open it up for about 30 minutes to audience questions. So please be thinking about questions for the panel as we have our discussion. And with that, I will go ahead and jump right in. It's great to see such a strong turnout for today's conversation, and I want to continue the conversation and the acknowledgement of Congressman Lee Hamilton, whose legacy for public service and leadership in foreign policy continues to shape the Hamilton-Lugar School. Congressman Hamilton represented a largely agricultural district right here in Indiana, including Bloomington. He understood deeply how global engagement and agriculture are connected, and we are honored to carry that perspective forward in today's discussion. As Vasco said, I am currently working at IU as the Senior Advisor and Vice President of Strategy for IU Lab. I am also a very proud alum of HLS. I technically was a student here before HLS existed, but I have been told by leadership that I can claim it as an alum. I did have quite a few breakfasts in the student union trying to talk to people about the importance of having a school as an international studies major. So I'm delighted to be here not only as a current IU employee, but also as an alum of HLS and someone who grew up in rural Indiana in Shelby County. Agriculture is often thought of local. Fields, farms, rural communities, just like the one I grew up in. But in reality, it's one of the most global industries we have. Here in Indiana, that connection is especially clear when you look at AgriNovus's Accelerate 2050 report, putting Indiana's agrobioscience, a term we will define for you, economy at approximately $70 billion in total economic contribution. For decades, farmers across the state have built strong export markets for soybeans, corn, pork, and other products, feeding not just our communities, but the world. And at the same time, that global connection brings both opportunities and uncertainty. Shifts in trade policy, evolving geopolitical relationships, supply chain disruptions, increasing global competition from countries like Brazil to emerging markets in Southeast Asia are reshaping the landscape in real time. So today, we're going to explore those global dynamics that are affecting Indiana agriculture, where new opportunities are emerging, and how a state can continue to compete and lead, including with emerging policy leaders like the students of HLS, in an increasingly complex global system. We're very fortunate to be joined by three leaders who bring distinct perspectives to this topic. Don Lamb, Indiana's Director of Agriculture. Don is a second-generation farmer in Boone County. He brings firsthand experience in production agriculture, agribusiness, and innovation. In 2012, Don's family farm started AgriStewards, a nonprofit which teaches farming practices to farmers in Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and Central America. In his role leading ISDA, he works at the intersection of policy, economic development, and global market access, supporting Indiana farmers while advancing the state's agricultural priorities both domestically and internationally. Dave Parrott, the Chief Operating Officer for Ports of Indiana. Dave oversees operations across Indiana's 3 ports, Burns Harbor, Jeffersonville, and Mount Vernon, connecting Hoosier products to global markets through the Great Lakes and inland waterways. With decades of experience in maritime logistics, supply chain, and infrastructure development, he plays a critical role in ensuring Indiana remains competitive in moving agricultural and industrial goods around the world. And finally, Christy Wright. She's the president and CEO of AgriNovus and has been since August of 2025. She brings 15 years of leadership in food and agriculture, having previously served as the director for global food systems at Corteva Agriscience. Christy's a 2-time IU grad, thank you, Christy, with a Bachelor's of Science and a Master's degree in Public Affairs. She brings experience spanning strategy, innovation, and commercialization. At AgriNovus, she leads efforts to grow Indiana's agrobioscience economy by connecting industry, academia, and government, helping position the state as a global leader in areas like plant science, animal health, bioinnovation, and including at the intersection of food, health, and sustainability. Thank you so much, panelists, for joining us today and for sharing your insights. So with that, let's jump right in. Don, I'm going to address this question to you, but as we will throughout the panel, all of the panelists, please feel free to contribute. So Don, kick us off. Agriculture contributes tens of billions of dollars to Indiana's economy. Indiana farmers, like yourself, are deeply connected to global markets, from soybeans going to China to corn and pork exports to North America. In a world shaped by trade tensions, shifting alliances, competition with countries like Brazil, how would you describe the current mood among farmers when it comes to international trade?
All right, well, let me first say thanks for being here, and I have to make a confession of sorts. This is probably my first time on the IU campus. Much like Hamilton Luger, I'm a Boilermaker here today, crossing that bridge. And I
wearing
did,
a red lanyard.
And I did root for the Hoosiers through the end of the football season, I can tell you that. But I am really, really happy to be here and look forward to this conversation. And when you think about the mood of agriculture right now, my farm is a corn and soybean farm, which I think a lot of people in Indiana think of Indiana as corn and soybeans. It's really a lot more diverse than that. But the mood of the corn and soybean farmer is not real good right now. We've really been through about 3 years now of really having a hard time making money, and then the hard time. This time of year, farmers are making plans, and you've borrowed money to put out a crop that really, when you borrow that money, you can't make it work out. You know, you can't take the prices that you can get right now with the costs that you have. So it feels a little bit. It's just an interesting situation to say, yeah, I'm going to plant this crop even though right now I can't make money at it, and so you're hoping for something to change. So I'd say on the corn and soy side, there's always this hope that farmers have that something will change that'll bring prices up, and really that we'll talk about a lot of different things this morning. But if you put that into, like, especially on the soybean side, when we think about our relationship with China, I graduated from the other school in 1989, and we rented some land that year from a guy who was a great IU supporter named Jesse Cox. And he told me all about why we should be so bullish about agriculture, and it was all about China. So in 1989, it was man, you guys are going to be in the driver's seat because China is such a growing economy, and so I went through that, and I really lived that out. China did grow so much in buying our products, But the whole time that we were selling products to China, we were also told the other side is, boy, it's hard to trust. It's hard to trust this system. We have a lot of issues with canceling orders, canceling contracts. It was just always trouble in dealing with China, even though they're our largest customer by far. And so now we've seen it kind of shift the other way a lot, where we're really struggling with that relationship with China. And at the same time, Brazil's been coming on at producing crops. And for a long time, we could always beat Brazil because of quality and infrastructure. I mean, they just had to get their crops so far to the ports, and it was all by truck, and they weren't really efficient at doing that. They're still struggling with that some, but they're getting better. Everybody around the world keeps getting better at doing what they do. It's just like any business you're in, the competition always gets better too. So anyway, what has happened in the last few years has just been the relationship between China and Brazil has become more solid. They're buying a lot more of those products, especially soybeans, but agriculture products from Brazil. And it's just a reality that we have to deal with. It's a reality that has shifted. So we're really shifting our efforts towards other places as much as possible, not really wanting to forget that relationship with China, because we still would like to sell products to China. But it has really changed. So yes, right now, as a corn and soybean farmer in Indiana, it's a struggle.
Dave, exports are central to Indiana's success story. Markets like Mexico, China, Canada have long been key, but we're seeing growth in Southeast Asia and other emerging regions. From your perspective, what are the most important global markets today, and are you seeing shifts in demand or new opportunities emerge?
Well, good morning, all. Appreciate being here as well, the invitation. I'm going to support Don on a lot of what he said there, a lot of repetition here, and some of the topics and the issues that we have. Obviously, Canada and Mexico will always be an important global partner for us. But beyond that, it gets real fuzzy. I mean, Don's highlighted a number of issues there with regards to China that was going gangbusters. It was going to be the be-all to end-all, and now slowly but surely it's becoming an issue. So, the crystal ball and what's going to be the best market in the future, where the emerging market is at, a year from now, 10 years from now, it's a bit fuzzy. I'll give you a few examples of when I was a kid. Taiwan was the big place. Everything was happening out of Taiwan. Now Taiwan's either the fourth or fifth trading partner for the United States. It's no longer number one. Another example in late 1980s, collapse of the Soviet Union. The next emerging market was going to be Russia and the former Soviet republics. Well, absolutely nothing happened there. That was a complete bust. Then in the early 1990s, China came in. It was crazy over there for sure. And it's been a powerhouse for the last 40 years, basically. But to Don's point, slowly but surely, that relationship is declining. Still very strong and a lot of economic dependency on both sides. But there is a shift going on there for sure. Southeast Asia, India becoming more prominent, making inroads into China's strong economy there. Obviously, trading with those locations is becoming a bigger and bigger deal. Agriculturally, certainly so. It's another problem with China, national security. There's been a lot of issues with regards to national security, with regards to sourcing so many products and very specific products out of China that forces us to consider, is that the best place to be doing business? A lot of industries are now reconsidering where they're sourcing their products from. Not China anymore. They have to find some of the location due to national security issues. China, their own right, very concerned about our tariffs. They certainly have a rethinking how they're going to do their inbound supply chain as well. So a lot of dynamics going on, a lot of changes. Only thing I can reassure you is that there's going to be change in the future. What that change is going to be, tough to say. Obviously with Venezuela, what's happened down there recently, maybe there is a new emerging market down there in Venezuela. South America has some other options with regards to Argentina. And probably the biggest news of the story of the day right now is the Middle East. If things work out well there and a peace can be made, maybe that's another emerging market as well there in the Middle East, particularly Iran.
So Christy, Dave, and Don have shared a lot about the global connections of agriculture, whether it's Brazil gaining in market share of soybeans, shifting U.S.-China trade dynamics, countries rethinking supply chains, like Dave was noting, in the name of food security and stability. Agronovus's Accelerate 2050 report underscores how these forces are accelerating change across the agriscience community. So the question is, How does Indiana not just react to these shifts, but get ahead of them and define its role in the global system?
Thanks, Jillian. Thanks for the question, and thank you all for being here today. And it's an honor to be back. As Jillian mentioned, I'm a two-time IU grad, and I always say IU is where I learned to think. It really is the place that sparked my curiosity, which continues to this day. And I'm so grateful for the professors and the student community and how they really encouraged my development. So I want to just mention a quick description of AgriNovus and what our mission is. So we are a nonprofit, and we exist to advance Indiana's ag bioscience economy. So what is ag bioscience? When we say that, what we mean is it's actually the combination of 5 platform economies in Indiana. And AgriNovus was founded 10 years ago by a board and also the first CEO who was Beth Bechtel, if you know her. She's now the Deputy Director General at FAO and UN. So what an awesome thing to have an Indiana person and an AgriNovus alum in that role. But at the time, what they noticed was Indiana had a very unique collection of assets in this space that cross these 5 platform economies, which we call ag bioscience. And so what that includes is ag production, also value-added food and nutrition, animal health and nutrition, crop science and crop health, and ag tech. And when you take those 5 platform economies together, you have about $70 billion worth of impact to our state economy. It puts us on par with the automotive industry, actually, in Indiana. And so a really powerful opportunity for our state and a very important economic engine. So wanted to just mention that kind of as laying some foundation for the question. AgriNovus commissioned a report in 2024 called Accelerate 2050. It's available on our website for download in case you're ever interested in it. But what it did was look out until 2050 to try to understand the global dynamics that would affect the ag and the ag bioscience sector and market space. And it identified really 3 areas of differentiated opportunity for Indiana. One of those is farmer-focused innovation, the second is bio-innovation, and the third is food is health, and I'm sure we'll touch on each of those as the conversation progresses this morning. I think the one thing I want to say and is important for us as Indiana to lean into is that when you look at those kind of 5 platforms, you have 2 that are especially large, ag production and value-added food and nutrition in Indiana. Each of those account for about $30 billion of economic impact. That is an interesting opportunity for us. It's unique. It also protects us a little bit from commodity swings and policy shifts. And so our ability to really lean into that diversity and that balance, in addition to the remaining kind of makeup of the other sectors or other platform economies, is I think really where the opportunity is, and look forward to kind of digging into that this morning a little bit.
So Dave, let's connect that to infrastructure. If Indiana is competing globally, it's not just what we grow, but how effectively we move it and connect to those markets. How do ports, inland waterways, logistics network shape Indiana's ability to compete with global exports? And again, a positive tone, what are the biggest opportunities in strengthening that edge?
Gotcha. Well, first start off by saying I'm not a Indiana alumni nor a Purdue alumni. I'm an Iowa Stater, so I've only been living in the state for about 1.5 years, so I'm slowly being adapted to be a Hoosier. So just wanted to mention that
we welcome you enthusiastically.
Thank you, appreciate that.
You're an I-State grad,
That's
so
right.
that puts you in great company in terms of agriculture in the United States.
Appreciate that. Anyway, the edge into Jillian's question there. I mean, surprisingly, of the 50 states in America, Indiana ranks 13th out of the 50 with regards to a maritime economy. It seems a bit strange, certainly. We're a landlocked state, and I think I heard the young gentleman over here mention that we're more or less landlocked. Well, surprisingly, over 50% of the state's borders are waterways. You got Lake Michigan up on the north, you got the Ohio River on the south, and the Wabash on the other side. Obviously, nothing happens on the Wabash, but plenty happens there in Lake Michigan and on the Ohio River. A lot of times when I first came here and took this job, I can't tell you how many times people said to me, there's actually ports in Indiana. And believe it or not, there are. Like I said, there's ports of Indiana is up in Lake Michigan at Burns Harbor. We have a facility in Mount Vernon and in Jeffersonville, Indiana. Very diverse facilities that gives a great edge to the state of Indiana with regards to moving products in and out of the state. We actually have facilities to do that. Another big advantage that we're trying to develop here and give the state of Indiana a further edge is what we call a container facility development effort. A lot of the world transportation and inbound and outbound traffic with regards to imports and exports, all moving containers. 7% of exports and imports move through containers. And if you're not doing containers, you're missing out on a huge segment of the economy when it comes to international trade. So the Ports of Indiana has an initiative to have each facility, all 3 facilities, be able to actually handle containers at those facilities. Once that is done, that's another huge advantage that will offer, be it the farmers or other industry within this state. So we have some great competitive edges developing, and it's looking forward to the opportunities that it's going to get for all of us.
Seeing as we have a policy-focused room here, can you touch a little bit on that process to be able to handle cargo? Is it federal? Is it state? Is it kind of, what is what's the road to success there?
Right. And each facility is different. I mean, obviously, on Lake Michigan, we are able to handle ocean-going vessels, which then creates the involvement of Customs and Border Protection. So up in that facility up there, there's some very strict regulations on how we have to handle containers, what we can and cannot do. Now, along the Ohio River, there are no such thing as ocean-going vessels. It's all barge traffic. So down there, the effort is through rail on containers. Have facilities that can rail in containers, load and unload those containers within the port, and give that edge for the Indiana farmers and agriculture areas down there. It's complex, it's difficult, and heavily involved, and we got another year plus before we can even really get the ball rolling sufficiently to actually make an impact.
Sequenced policy discussions.
Hey, Jillian.
Interesting.
Jillian, can I jump in?
Yes, of course, please.
'Cause I'm just dying over here.
Yeah, come on, Don.
So just even 2 or 3 questions back, and then I think it all ties together, because you mentioned USMCA, and I'd come talking about China and that sort of thing. I just wanted to reiterate the fact that trade relationship with Mexico and Canada is so important. They're by far our biggest trading partners. Yep. And so, and that will be renegotiated this year in 2026. Every year, parts of the Departments of Agriculture, so the national departments of my cohorts, we get together with Mexico and Canada and have what we call a trinational accord, where you're trying to always work on that relationship and anticipate issues that could come up when the trade deal is renegotiated. So I would just put that on the radar screen from policy folks in the room. The USMCA will be so important to get right when we do that later this year. And so that's really, really important. When I was thinking about Christy's question about Agrinovus and the $70 billion, and she mentioned $30 billion plus of production. One thing about Indiana, as I said, I'm a corn and soybean guy, and a lot of people think of that as being right. But we're the 9th largest farming state. So out of 50 states, we're the 9th largest farming state. We're the 7th largest ag exporter, which those are good numbers. But if you think about it, we're the 38th largest state geographically. So we're not a big state. And agriculture really relies on land to do it. So when you think about being the 38th largest state in size, but being the 9th largest farming state by revenue, being the 7th largest ag exporter, it means that we add a lot of value. And that's kind of where Christy's group comes in. So much of our products are made into something else, and that makes it easier to export those products. So we do a really good job of adding value to our products here in Indiana. But we're in the top 5 in pork, we're in the top 5 in poultry, we're in the top 5 in eggs, we're in the top 5 in tomatoes, we're in the top 5 in, we're the number 1 in popcorn, which my farm raises popcorn. We're number 1 in duck, which you may not eat a lot of duck, but a lot of the world eats a lot of duck, and we're the number 1 state for producing duck up in northern Indiana. So the diversity, hardwoods is a $10 billion industry in Indiana. That's huge. It really is about like corn and soybeans, is the hardwood industry when you think about that. So the diversity of agriculture is so important, and that's where all this comes into play when we think about, then you come back and think about containers and all those products that I say we're adding value to it. These are not just big cargo ships with commodities on them. That's where the containers are so important, because these are products that have been had value added to them, and then we ship them out. And so it really is a very intertwined system across a lot of different products.
Yeah, and I would add too that the, what Dave described and then Don added to there is that this is the reason that that ports and also our ability, just logistics in general, is not a side conversation for Indiana Ag Bioscience. It's a core competitive advantage. And the states that will win in the future are not just the ones that grow it or that invent and discover new tech. It's going to be the ones that can invent it, make it, and move it. And we have in our state the ability to do all three of those things, which is a highly unique opportunity.
And surprisingly, with being, as small a state as we are and landlocked, as we say, we're 13th out of 50 in the maritime industry. It's a big deal. There's a lot of water traffic and ocean transportation that takes and river transportation that takes place here in Indiana. It's a very surprising thing, but it's a big deal. And I have a big support for agriculture and other industry here, and that helps the state grow substantially.
I was at the State Department working on multi-party negotiations and public affairs in Buenos Aires when we signed USMCA, and proximity matters because we were in the final stages of USMCA, and Argentina said, hey, we're hosting, what about our beef? And so it was not originally part of the conversation, but Argentina was able to advance their position by being very warm and gracious hosts to some of those USMCA conversations. Don, I'm going to stick with you. We're going to zoom out a little bit around Indiana's ag bioscience economy. We've talked about approaching 70 billion. And as the global demand evolves, whether it's protein demand in developing economies or sustainable products in Europe, how do you see Indiana's biggest opportunity to move beyond commodities to capture more of that value that you were describing?
Yeah. Well, you hear the word protein a lot. So, that's really a key to so many things. And so many countries are in different stages of development, but a lot of times you'll just watch that word protein kind of go up with developing countries and what they want, whether that's, really usually starts with poultry. Chicken is a cheaper source of protein, and then you move yourself up to different animal products. And so, we think about that a lot. And when I think about being a corn and soybean producer here in Indiana, those commodities are really important because we talk about adding value a lot, but you also, those commodities are what give that base of protein for the world. We really have a cheaper source of food for most of the world because we can efficiently raise a lot of corn and soybeans as commodities that are turned into that protein. Whether it gets made into a chicken here and chicken products are exported, or whether that soybean goes to another country and they actually turn it into oil and meal in their country, or whether we are actually shipping out oil and meal from here, there's all these different aspects of that protein. So when we talk about corn and soybeans, I don't want to ever sound like, well, we got to move away from that and get on, we do need to add value, but still that base product and raising it efficiently is such an important part of that puzzle. And then really what Christy does at AgriNovus and thinking about the ag biosciences, the life sciences, and where that plays into it is just that way to really add value. And when we think about that, we think about One Health, and that'll probably come out as some other term in the next year or so because we're working on how do you market that. We've got such a neat ecosystem in Indiana between Lilly and Elanco and Corteva and IU and Purdue being downtown in Indianapolis now. There's a core there that really does work well together, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But there's a whole other world of food is medicine, healthy food really is such a relief to so many things around the world. So I don't know. I don't even know what the question was now. I'm just
moving beyond commodity value and how do you capture more of the market?
Yeah. So it's just every piece of that puzzle is so important in how we add that value and then how we get it shipped around the world.
Yeah. And Don and I are actually in touch at least every other day, Don, don't you think? I mean, we work side by side to help advance exactly this type of opportunity for Indiana. One other thing I would just add on the topic of demand is that an interesting, I guess, reshaping of domestic demand right now is what's happening with GLP-1 and also the food is health kind of macro trend, it is reshaping what Americans are eating and what we are producing, therefore, in agriculture. And the technology that underpins what we produce, and Don alluded to this is the kind of innovation that comes from the companies and the innovators that are looking at seeds and breeding and crop inputs and how we grow food and what that food, how the crops, the kind of nutritional complexion of those crops, and then how that affects us. This is a frontier that is being actively seized in Indiana, and it's a really fascinating reshaping of eating and of the value chain that's underway right now in this space.
Let's dig into that a little bit. We've mentioned agrobioscience several times, innovation accelerating globally in the way we eat and what we eat, and from AI to gene editing to alternative proteins and biofuels. Countries around the world are investing heavily in those areas. So how can Indiana turn trends or priorities like food is health into bioinnovation and true global competitive advantage?
So I think that there are three things that we know that Indiana is uniquely positioned to do, and you've heard snippets of this morning. Number one is we have a very unusual concentration of plant, animal, and human science in our state. And so there's a lot of investment in countries across the world in components of that, but that investment's happening in silos. In Indiana, it's actually starting to be a lot more intersectional. The foundational science underneath each of those areas can be transferred and is starting to be actually transferred. It's very exciting to kind of watch this emerge here in Indiana, where you're taking things, genetics, where you're taking advanced chemistry science, where you're taking, using, microbiome libraries that have only been screened for plants, and then screening them in animal health, and then screening them for human health, and thinking like, oh, there may be some new opportunities here just by taking advantage of the fact that we have these leaders from a company perspective, we have the leaders from the university perspective, and then we have kind of the startup and innovation community around them. So the first advantage is plant, animal, and human health, also known as One Health, sometimes referred to as food is health. So that's advantage one. Advantage two is the fact that we invent, make, and move. So I mentioned this before, but to have all three of those things is unicorn territory. And then the third thing is collaboration. And side note, that video about Congressman Hamilton was, I actually got a little bit choked up. I was really moved by the leadership and even across the video, and the recognition of his role. The description of Hoosiers, it exists, that kind of ethos exists within our ecosystem. And it's unique, and it leads to this level of collaboration that doesn't happen in other places. And so while collaboration gets kind of thrown around a lot, we have recognized it here, and even across the CEOs, President Whitten is at the table and driving a lot of these things. President Chang, the CEOs of these large corporations, the innovation community are all the ones that are actually driving this kind of collaboration to happen. So I think those are the three things that we lean into for Indiana.
There's been all kinds of, Fortune magazine, et cetera, have rated different innovation clusters around the world. And Indiana scores off the charts in innovation and entrepreneurship, not because we have the richest ecosystem for venture, but because of what they call the bounce rate. So if you are a CEO, an entrepreneur, and you reach out to someone, a fellow entrepreneur, someone who's 15 years farther down the path, how likely are they to take your call? How likely are they to meet you for coffee? How likely are they to introduce you to 3 other people? We score off the charts in that, even for cold calls, and it really affects the way that we're able to move innovations through the ecosystem, not just within Indiana, but globally. And it's something that's been kind of charted, that Hoosier hospitality and approach to innovation. There's some really exciting things happening in the One Health space. Just this week, the Indiana Bioscience Research Institute, which is a therapeutics incubator primarily focused on Alzheimer's disease, based at 16 Tech in Indianapolis, where both of our offices are, announced a partnership with Elanco. And if you would have asked me a couple years ago, would I think IBRI, who's doing amazing research in the therapeutic space around drug discovery for Alzheimer's, would be partnering with Elanco, that was kind of unimaginable. And now it 100% makes sense. That of course IBRI and Elanco would be partnering on kind of the next innovation in drugs to improve animal health. Thank you.
I might throw in one more
please.
thing as far as bringing perspective back to when we talk about ag biosciences, when we talk about AI and things like that, there's always this local component to it. And in agriculture, you can imagine I talk a lot about land use, and we talk a lot about we've lost 350,000 acres of farmland in the last from 2010 to 2022 in Indiana. And development always seems to be this thing that we're kind of fighting against as agriculture, and we need land to grow food on. And so, but these conversations have to be real and honest, where you think about a data center has become kind of a bad word in most areas. But that's what allows the AI. And right now we're slightly ahead of China in developing some of that technology on the AI side. And yet they're right there with us. And who's going to control that? So you've got this really big global question, and then it affects a local economy because we need data centers to do that. And yet it affects a local community in so many ways. And so those conversations just become really interesting. So in all this technology and all the ag biosciences, it always comes back to local conversations as well, and relationships, and what's really important. So I would encourage you just to be engaged in those conversations in a thoughtful way. We get so many emotions that go with these things, especially from the ag side, but we have to think through these things strategically and what's important. So it's interesting how I get to see both of those worlds.
Dave, in recent years, we're talking about innovation and how that's impacting supply chains. Our global supply chains have really been stress tested. When you look at pandemic disruptions, geopolitical conflicts, shifting trade routes, from your vantage point, what are the biggest lessons Indiana's learned about building a system that's not just efficient, but also has the right flexibility and resiliency to navigate these uncertain and shifting times?
Right. Certainly, it's diversification of your supply chain is going to be critical. Obviously, with adding containers into the mix here in Indiana, it's going to be a big advantage for us. It's going to create some opportunities that may have not been there in the past that may be able to help overcome some of the supply chain issues. But diversification is going to be key. Have contingencies. Do not rely upon just one route to get your product from point A to point B. It's only a matter of time before that route's going to have some sort of breakdown. So always have a second option available to you to get your products moving. Without that, you will be very vulnerable to some failures. And there's been companies that have had to shut down assembly lines. Companies have lost significant sales, but they couldn't get their products to market, either inbound or on an export basis. So always have diversification, multiple supply chain routes for your products. We talked about COVID. We all saw what happened in COVID. Supply chains were completely blown up with COVID. You see the Straits of Hormuz today with regards to oil and that supply chain being disrupted. We know what's happening to gas prices and oil prices. That supply chain getting messed up. So we know what happens when supply chains are not being managed properly. It's a big complication to try and diversify your supply chain, but it's something you really have to work on. Without diversification, you will be very vulnerable to failures, for sure.
There's I keep bringing it to the farm level too, because it's the same thing at the farm level. When you think about my dad's 88 years old. He's still out sitting at the desk every day at the farm, and he always talks about efficiency versus effectiveness. And he says sometimes those two things don't go together. But what we've done in agriculture is we keep we keep becoming more specialized. We became a corn and soybean wheat farm, where when I was growing up, we had livestock on our farm as well. So we had that diversification. That was really the way farmers survived back in the 70s, was you had both sides. If the livestock side was up, the crop side might be down, and vice versa, and you survived that way. Well, you can be much more efficient if you concentrate on one thing. And that's what we've done in agriculture, is we've concentrated on one thing. We've gotten bigger, but now we're feeling the vulnerability of, wow, I really wish I had some beef cattle right now, because those guys are making a killing. But that's the way agriculture works. And so you're seeing a shift now in our mindset because of the struggle that we're having on one side. People are having new conversations again about what if we added more value to this, or had a different diversification at the farm level too. So that farm level all through the supply chain starts at the farm gate, and you're seeing some of those conversations. It's hard though, like you said, it's a hard thing to shift a supply chain, and so it's hard to make that change.
Yeah, when something works and it's been working for years, you don't want to make that change, but that's when you get complacent and lazy, and that's the last thing you need to be doing. You need diversification. Even when things are working, look for alternatives. Just have something in the back pocket. You know, all the eggs in one basket certainly leads to eventual failure.
Christy, we're here at HLS with students in the audience who are interested in global affairs. And agriculture may not be the first field that comes to mind when they're thinking about what their future holds and where to invest their time and expertise. But we know through this conversation and looking at the field that it really is at the intersection of economic development, food security, even national security, as Dave was saying. So how does Indiana agriculture connect to global challenges, and why should future diplomats in the audience and policymakers be paying attention?
So I love this question for many reasons, and I'm going to answer it directly, but first I'm going to say that I love this question because I am not a native Aggie. I am a cul-de-sac kid from Fort Wayne. And so I came to ag through a passion for food security after spending some time in food insecure communities. So I'd like to just philosophically tell you something and then get real practical. There is no industry that is more fundamental to human thriving than agriculture. When you look at or talk about the challenges that gather diplomats and policymakers and others in a room like this, which are conflict, which are poverty, which are climate, which are health, public health, food is running underneath all of that. And so the kind of substrate that really drives economies to grow or collapse, that drives people to stay or flee, that drives whether humans thrive or don't, the substrate underneath that is agriculture. It is a fundamentally global industry, and it is so critical to solving these very complex problems that you all are playing a role in or are interested in and intrigued by. From a practical standpoint, one of the things that we do at AgriNovus is we help students and young professionals get connected to and understand how their degree or their expertise may apply to a career in ag bioscience. So how might my digital communications degree or my IT degree or my public affairs degree, my nonprofit management degree apply to ag bioscience? That's one of our jobs to do. And there is a much broader fit than you may think. We need scientists, we need economists, we need statisticians, we need communicators. So I would encourage you to do the things that I did, which are ask for informational interviews, which are explore and talk to people that you meet like Don. Please reach out to me directly. I'm speaking to the students, but everyone in the room if you have any interests or questions. My email address is cwright@agrinovus.com. We want to talk with you and we want to help you connect to an industry that we feel so passionately about. And we desperately need people like you who are going to help us solve these big issues to help people get fed and nourished.
I'd like to echo everything she just said, and then add on one little selfish thing. If you're looking for a career and thinking about where to be, I would, even IU people, we would love to have you in agriculture. But agriculture people are good people. And so you're going to work with good people. If you get into the agricultural field, you're going to have fun because you're going to be with people that in general are honest, hardworking, good people that have got this. So and I've learned this from coming off the farm 3 years ago to entering this world where I've seen so much more about the people who back up agriculture and just like what Christy's doing. So yeah, it's just going to be a good place to have a career with solid people around you if you get involved in agriculture.
I was in a meeting with a life sciences executive a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about STEM enrollment, about investments in STEM fields, and thought, this is gonna be a slam dunk, he's gonna love this is so important to his industry. And he said, what are you doing around the humanities? What are you doing around public policy? What are you doing, and things that all of you are focused on at the Hamilton Lugar School? He said, AI is really changing how we're thinking about STEM. A lot of the people that we were hiring and the ways that we were looking at the analysis we needed to have, AI is really coming a long way in STEM. AI is not gonna help me think critically. AI is not gonna come up with different strategies. And as a humanities HLS person, I'm like, say it again, but it really, as a leadership team after that meeting, we had a really good conversation around, what was said in the video about skating to not where the puck is, but where the puck is going. And it was a really proud reminder as a international studies and public policy person, how critical people like you are in those conversations that otherwise, may be STEM territory, so to speak, because there's those teams at universities. When you get out in the real world, there aren't those teams. You need everybody from different disciplines, different trainings, different backgrounds, different perspectives to be sitting around the table making a decision. If you have people who all have the same training and the same background, you're really leaving a lot on the table in terms of how effective you can be. So I wanted to just bring that in because I think sometimes, it can be challenging when you're thinking about, okay, I'm doing really interesting things and I'm having really interesting conversations with fellow students and professors. I studied economic and human rights and social movements in the Middle East and North Africa. My parents said, that's so interesting. Who's gonna pay the cell phone bill? I went on to have a great career at the State Department and for the state of Indiana, and now I'm back at IU, so there are many, many jobs. But in case you too are thinking, I love what I'm doing day to day at HLS, how do I make a career out of that? Think broadly in fields like agriculture where you can really bring that interdisciplinary training and perspective that you have to a really important discussion that is steeped in deep geopolitical and policy conversations. So Don, looking ahead, we're seeing trends like reshoring, climate-driven systems, and shifts in production, like Christy was saying, rising global demand. What do you expect next for Indiana's role in global agriculture?
I think on the global scale, you're going to see a lot of what we've been talking about, developing new technologies and things like that. At more of the local level, again, we're seeing a shift. We have an executive order at the Department of Ag to study what are the barriers to local food production. So we would love to see more local food production. And so that, when I say that farmers are stepping back a little bit and say, okay, what do I need to do that could be diversification? I think that'll happen. But if you think about that question, it's a lot more about packaging and processing and how do you get it to scale where you can actually sell your product at a grocery store type level. Because farmers markets are great, and the Indiana Grown program is part of our Department of Agriculture. We love that local food feeling, but it doesn't move the needle when it comes to the amount of food that people are really buying, year round, day to day to feed themselves with. So So you've got to kind of take that gap, and you're taking something that's actually the most expensive food, the good food that's raised locally, and you're trying to get it to a lot of people who maybe are the least likely to be able to afford it in many cases. So you're trying to fill that gap. And so, and again, so as far as that, the answer to that question, I see us adding value on the big scale, like we've been doing, and we'll come through this corn and soybean thing, and we'll come through that, and that side will keep going. But I also see that local side being developed, but it's different than just, you can't get enough people to grow food in their backyard to make a difference on the real scale we need to. We've got to be able to grow things like, I don't want to share my secret. So. Why don't we grow edamame here in Indiana? It's a soybean. We grow, so that's what edamame is. And so I would love to grow edamame, but we need a processor. You can't just, if you're going to sell that edamame to a grocery store, you can't just take it out of your backyard. You've got to, so you get into the innovation, even there, you get into how do we harvest this on a scale that we can make affordable and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of this at every level that's going to keep advancing with technology.
Yeah, I agree with everything Don said. I think what I look forward to is, and where I think we really have the opportunity to, again, kind of move to a breakthrough space, is to make sure that our ecosystem is very well connected. And the better we do that and the faster we do that, the more competitive that we will be. And that's another key role that AgriNovus plays. We're kind of like, in Batman and Robin, we're the Robin, in that we are always wanting to make everybody successful. Like, we are not the main, we don't own the science, we don't do the science. We don't own the company, we don't work at the company. We are here to support, to connect, to help all of these entrepreneurs thrive, to help new innovation find its way to market, to help incumbents and corporates be successful with their next steps, to help universities and students get connected and the research to come to market or to come to be published that helps advance society. So that, I think, is a really important part of our success and our next steps, is making sure that we've got that really great connectivity to ensure that those things happen.
This is my last question before we turn it over to all of you. So start thinking about your questions for the panel. On a forward-looking note, Dave, I'm going to start with you on this. In a world of increasing competition and complexity, what gives you the most confidence about Indiana's role in global agriculture and ag bioscience going forward?
Yeah, and certainly from a Ports of Indiana standpoint, we have a lot of significant confidence that we can support the agriculture industry here in the state. The port moves about 13 million tons of cargo a year through the port facilities. About a third of that is agricultural based. We have significant investment going on in Mount Vernon and Jeffersonville with soybean facilities for export. We actually will be opening up our grain elevator back up in Burns Harbor. There'll be a new operator up there. They'll start up in summertime. That facility has been closed for about 3 years, so now we'll be able to support Northern Indiana grain facility, et cetera, to help farmers up there. Our container initiative also is going to be another avenue that we can support and provide confidence to the agricultural community here by providing some container handling capabilities. Public and private partnerships have been a big deal for the Ports of Indiana as well with regards to investment and even Indiana governmental policies. Encouraging economic growth and job creation is a big deal. So we have a lot of confidence in the Ports of Indiana that we can support the ag industry very much.
Don?
I would just say, you can kind of look to the past to tell the future, and if you look back far enough, we've been through a lot of hard things in this country, and this country's the best at getting through hard things. And so, and sometimes we feel like as a corn and soybean farmer for 3 years of struggling to make money, it feels like you're in this big pit. But if you just stretch it out a little bit further, we've been through much worse things than that, and parts of the ag economy have been strong through that too. And so, I guess I'm optimistic because there's not a reason not to be. When I think about what we've done in this country with ag, why would we think that we're going to fall on our face now? We're going to keep moving forward. And so, mine's more of a philosophical answer of just, wow, we've got great people, and we're in a great country, and we've got a lot of freedom to be creative, and we're going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, this conference makes me optimistic. You all being here makes me optimistic. the amazing, we're rich with assets in Indiana, and that makes me optimistic too. And so I think the future is so bright for us, and I thank you all for what you're studying and the work that you're doing, because that's how we're going to move forward and chart the next chapter.
Questions? Please.
Hi, Ryan McDonald. I'm a second-year MA student here at Hamilton Luger, but before that, I was an agricultural worker at a family-owned strawberry farm in Northwest Indiana. So if I can find some Agri-Novus connection, I have been directly impacted by the areas that you three deal with as much as anybody I think can be. My question to you all would be, what is the biggest misconception you'd like to correct in the Americans' understanding of their own agricultural sector, and what that means for the industry looking towards the future?
I'll start with one that I fight all the time is I feel like there's always this thing about big versus small, and you hear corporate agriculture, you hear factory farming, you hear things like this, and it's really hard to define where that mix would be. My family I'm a second generation farmer. My dad grew up in Indianapolis, and was in the service and rented a farm through the mail back home. He was stationed in Italy at the time. And like I say, he's still sitting there at the desk at our farm today. My brother and his boys are managing the farm. But we farm about 10,000 acres, and we have 10 employees, and we're a corporation. We're Lamb Farms Incorporated. That's our last name, and that's. So are we a corporate farm? Are we a big, and we're more of a commodity farm. And so there's this misconception that big agriculture is not necessarily good. Small agriculture is good, but if you're small agriculture, you kind of need to get big to be able to make a living. There's a reality there that you have to make money, and so I guess the thing I would like to do the most is see agriculture stay united at every level, from small through big, and do things right, and trust the science, and a lot of times bigger agriculture actually has the wherewithal to make sure they're doing it right, where sometimes when you're struggling along, it can actually be the opposite. So there's just this conception of big, small, good, bad, where we all work together is really the key.
It's a great question. When I came into ag, I was overwhelmed in some cases there's I think a general. There has been historically a disconnect between consumers and what happens on the farm. Over my time at Corteva Agriscience, in a kind of 15-year arc when I was there, I saw a very quick change. I think there was a time when there actually started to be a lot of interest in what was happening on the farm. And what is biotech? And what do you mean? What do you mean about chemicals being used in the process of raising food? Why would we do that? So I think that there's just, in general, it's a very complex industry. It's some that, when some people start to learn about it, they sort of slowly back away because there's so much to know. It's like, oh, holy moly, I didn't really think I was getting into all of this. So the most important kind of kernel that I took away from Corteva time related to consumers and misconceptions is, Don alluded to it, but golly, the regulatory process, the paces that each of these products get put through in order to come to market is astounding. In some of these cases, from discovery to commercial starting gate is 10 to 15 years. The investment bars are super duper high. So the important thing, I think, is enabling lots of types of food to be grown and offer choice to consumers rather than trying to kind of say no to that fundamentally, no to that fundamentally. That's what I would say.
And I'll just add this to what Christy mentioned there. Don't underestimate the value of specialty crops. There is a global demand for specialty. Granted, they move in containers as opposed to the big ocean-going ships that move 35,000 tons at a time, but there is a demand out there. And that's part of the reason why we're trying to get involved in containers, is that some of the local farmers do have specialty products that they'd like to sell overseas, and it's just hard to get them out of the state if you're having to move everything in a bulk fashion. So specialty is not a thing to underestimate.
Hi there. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here. My name's Garrett Park. I'm a freshman here studying cybersecurity and global policy alongside East Asian languages and cultures. And my background's in the steel industry here in Indiana, in my hometown of Fort Wayne, with Steel Dynamics. And while it's not directly related to agriculture, we deal a lot with water management. And especially as Don, you alluded to with data centers and AI and balancing that with farmers and agriculture, and alongside Christy with your company's research likely into providing more efficient crops for watering and growth. My question is to both of you, especially with the very recent developments in AI and laws from the State House mandating that companies publish their water use in the quarterly fashion, and with developments in New Carlisle from Meta with their massive data centers, I was wondering, in both of your roles, how are you guys going to be accommodating water use and balancing that with agricultural needs for farmers, planting their crops and watering them? Thank you.
Great question. Whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. That's what they say out west, and we never thought we'd say that in Indiana. We just have never really had to fight that much about water in Indiana, especially in the ag side of it. And we never thought, I'm from Boone County, so if you know what's happened with the LEAP development in Boone County and moving water from the possibility of moving water from Tippecanoe County down to Boone County. So I've seen this firsthand. The meta you're talking about is 7 miles from my house. So I've seen it all firsthand. Indiana's interesting because up north we've got more sandy soil and we've got plenty of water up there, and we do a lot of irrigation up there. It's interesting. Sandy soil is not necessarily a great thing for crops, but if you add water to it, it's very consistent. So it's really good for raising specialty crops. That's why a lot of our tomatoes and our seed corn and things like that are in northern Indiana. We come down through where I live and down to about Mooresville, and we've got pretty adequate water that we can get to most of the time. And you get further south down into here, and you've got to go 300 feet to get a well for your home. And so we've just got a lot of variation in the availability of water in our state. So that's been part of the education, is just for enough people to realize that we've just got this challenge of where the water is. We've actually got plenty of water in Indiana. We just don't have it in the right spots all the time. And so, but we always would have assumed that if there was a shortage in water, it would really affect agriculture, and it would, or that we might even be a part of that equation of why we have a shortage, because we're using so much of it. Agriculture uses about 3% of the water, so it's just not a big deal. The data centers, and I'm not going to take a side one way or the other on data centers. I'd probably could get things thrown at me either way on this. But one thing that they have done so much better is they've figured out ways to recycle that water. So it does take a lot of water to cool them. Up north in the northern climates, they're actually not using water so much because it's just cool enough that they can do it without using so much water. But we are recycling a lot of that water in data centers, and the technology is changing really fast on that. So that's going to be one answer, is if that technology can keep improving to the point where you don't actually use up that water. But water quality has always been an issue, and we have a soil conservation part of our department where we have a program called Clean Water Indiana, so we're always concerned about water quality and what we're getting in the water and keeping things out of the water that shouldn't be there. But now water quantity adds this whole other side to it that we just really haven't spent a lot of time dealing with. But there is a lot of attention to it right now. There is studies, like you say, that are being commissioned and being done to not regulate it yet, but at least find out where it's going. And that's, having the data to start with is the main thing. And so anyway, it's always a big deal. And that's a great question, and I get things like that a lot.
Yeah. A quick IU story for you. So I signed up for L142 back in the day. I went to my discussion section, and I signed up for it because it was at 11:15. It was not at 8 a.m. And so I had no idea what the discussion section was about. And the professor wrote on the board, "Can computers think?" And I was like, oh, I was like, this is going to be the driest semester of my life. And it turned out to be my favorite class at IU. We read Isaac Asimov, we read about the Turing test, we read Galatea 2.2. It was so fascinating to me because it became more about what it means to be human. That was really where that's really what our class fundamentally ended up talking about. It stuck with me so much that I actually looked up my professor, Dr. McDowell. I found him and I said, do you still have that syllabus from 26 years ago when you were my professor? So I find it interesting because a lot of the same topics that we were talking about then, we're talking about now. So I think Don answered it well, the conundrum that we're in. Indiana has a lot of water, as he said, and so we've become a highly interesting place for this kind of development for data centers. The data centers and the data infrastructure are really important to some of the multi-platform science that we talked about before. The ability, in fact, to bring together, and there's even some talk about bringing together an applied AI hub in Indiana, especially with those big anchor companies and the universities we have here. What does that mean for our farmland? What does that mean for our water? I'm also on the board of the Nature Conservancy of Indiana, and we're grappling with the same things because we're being contacted for advice, on how to think about this and how to move forward responsibly. So AgriNovus does never advocate, but we provide data, and that's what we're looking to do right now, and to help support our partners who are considering these different aspects of their business needs. So it's a very interesting, dynamic topic, one that's moving quickly. I think from a policy standpoint, it will be really interesting and important to see how this unfolds. Right now, it's on a community by community basis also, which is fascinating, the very local dynamics to it. So.
Hi, I don't know how many international representation here, but I'm from Ukraine. So my question out of curiosity and touching this global issue for those conferences, have you ever thought of creating some brand, some product, agricultural product, with the brand which can stand up globally? For example, like little country like Ireland created Kerrygold butter, which is everywhere in the world, right? So something like that. And second part of my question is, you cannot export not only like food products, but also technologies related to agriculture. And again, it can be brand related to Indiana, become a global brand. So that's my question to you. Thanks.
From the breadbasket, an important agricultural country. Thank you for your question. So I would say some things that come to mind for me also are things like bourbon and things like champagne that are very regionally relevant in terms of how they are produced or how they're raised. I think it's a really interesting idea. It's also a kind of an interesting diplomatic tool. We've seen it be used also from a political standpoint. And so, yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea. And I think that it's a great example of how food and growing, and agriculture can tell a story.
One thing I would say is I think we're already a lot smaller than what most of us think we are as far as our relationships and the people. 2 days ago, I had the ambassador from Moldova at the Department of Agriculture on the 6th floor of One North Capitol. And if you don't know where Moldova is, it's right next to Ukraine, between Ukraine and Romania. And it's a beautiful country. I saw a lot of pictures and a great place to visit if there wasn't a war going on fairly close. And but I guess I would tell you that those kinds of conversations and things happen pretty often where they are coming. A lot of countries will work with individual states even more than they work with a country. It's going to come from the country, obviously, but they want to develop a relationship with a state. So whether it's actually a brand or not, a lot of times there's a relationship there where they want to work with Indiana and they'd like trade's always a two-way street. It's not that you just want to buy products. You want to be able to sell products. And Moldova is great with wine. We keep talking about alcohol for some reason, but they're a huge wine producing country for as small as they are. And so they'd love to sell us wine, and they'd love to buy corn and soybeans and feed for livestock from us. And so whether it's a brand or not, the relationships are what's important.
First of all, thank you all for coming and sharing your knowledge with us. I'm Kelly Branson. I'm a fourth year here at HLS studying international studies with minors in Southeast Asian studies and sociology. My question is a little bit off topic. We've touched on it a little bit, but I would like to focus on the environment and how each of your organizations, departments are addressing some of the environmental concerns relating to agriculture. Specifically, I know that you were talking about your organization, Agri-Stewards, and how you bring farming to other parts of the world. And I know there's different environmental concerns, like specifically in Southeast Asia, there's lots of environmental concerns surrounding the Mekong subregion with agriculture. So I was just wondering how your organizations and departments are addressing these.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. One thing I said we have this division in our department called soil conservation. We're in the midst of changing that. We want to call it land stewardship instead of soil conservation, because soil conservation is part of land stewardship, but it is taking care holistically of what the resource you have is. And so that is a really big deal to us. And when we're thinking locally here, we think a lot about soil health, and we think a lot about regenerative farming, and that's a term that I like. There's been terms that get thrown around in agriculture. Sustainable's been a hard one for the ag community to get around, because what's it mean? Part of being sustainable is being able to make money and survive and all those sorts of things. But this regenerative agriculture is something where I think it tells the better story of we're really trying to keep the life of that soil, because the soil is where the food starts, and that gets to health, and everything we're talking about today starts at the soil and moves its way through the food. And so yes, we're highly involved in all that. When we think about other countries and what we do with Agri-Stewards, the thing that we teach them is that you basically use what God's put in your hand. And so many times that's a hoe. And so you teach them as much as you can of how to farm with what they have, but to take care of the soil. A lot of the world doesn't know that you can keep growing the same crops for 100 years on the same soil. They use up the soil they have, or something, I'm not sure exactly what the environmental concern you're talking about, but there's something negative about what's happening in that soil. And so, you really teach them to take care of what they have with what they have to work with. Not trying to westernize, not trying to modernize, not trying to bring, equipment too fast. They've got to understand the concepts first. So much of what you're talking about is understanding the concepts of what their end goal is, and then doing in your own small way what you can on your land.
So first, I want to acknowledge and thank Don for his leadership in this way, because both through ISDA and through Land Farms, what Don is doing, he's a grower leader. Others look at him and emulate what he does, not only in Indiana but abroad, and so I think it's to be applauded. The second thing I want to mention is that when I came into ag in 2010, I was fresh eyes outsider. So not all farmers are like Don. I would say that in general, what I thought was the definition of a good farmer was clean fields and high yields, full stop. They always have been stewards of their land, because that's where their families live and that's their livelihood. So they've always been good stewards, and they haven't really talked about it, but farmers in general have to be good stewards to make a living. What I saw over 15 years, though, was I would say an evolution of the definition of a good farmer, and at least in the U.S. And that came to include some of the things Don has talked about, but it's a lot about regenerative practices, sustainability. It's a kind of And at the same time, there was a fundamental leveling up of inputs that happened. So the tech that has gone into all of the inputs, whether it's seeds, whether it's crop protection, whether it's fertilizer, all of these things have gotten fundamentally better from an environmental standpoint and a footprint standpoint. And then the third thing that happened is the downstream value chain, especially the food companies, started to make it a mandate. Like growing practices were starting to be, changed in order to deliver your product to them. So I think that from an environmental standpoint, what I've seen is a great step forward in that regard. Farmers have always been good stewards, but now it's an absolute kind of business. It's part of their fundamental business, I would say, to advance in that space.
We sell the example of that. We sell corn. We sell cornstarch. We sell corn into Ingredion in Indianapolis, and we tell them everything we do to every field. We have 115 fields, and now about half of that would be corn. We tell them everything that we do to that field, and we track all that. They know where every field is by GPS coordinates and how far that field is to our grain dryer. And then they know if it comes in at 22% moisture and we have to dry it to 15% moisture, they think about, they want to know that result. And then how far are we from our storage area to the final destination. And they basically have a carbon score of every field that we have, because their customers, which is PepsiCo and the big food companies, want to know this. And so we as farmers, we're fine with giving you that information. You kind of need to pay us to do it, but they do. As long as we're part of that chain, that value chain, we'll provide that information and we'll do what you want us to do. But it's got to pay money to make it so we can make a living.
I think that's all. I'm seeing I have 25 seconds, so I'm gonna go ahead and thank the panelists and thank you for your thoughts. Thank you everyone for your questions.
Thank you.